Darren Barnett, has the government got a problem with its price cap strategy?
Well, it's a bit early to tell. I don't think we can be too surprised that there's some boxing in the early rounds that suppliers and producers are trying to, continue things as have been the case. Equally, we don't want to see a rerun of the mining tax, and we don't want to see all sorts of business going to the wall. We don't want to see problems with supply on the East Coast. But I think what we'll see, the ACCC put out its basically punitive measures, its carrots and sticks today, and with fines of up to $50 million on the table, I think you'll see some better behaviour from the gas companies quick smart.
Now, I wanted to ask you both about the Indigenous Voice to Parliament. I might ask you first, Darren, as kind of the Labor-aligned person on the panel. Bit of a brutal question, really, because I quite like Linda Burney. She was on the program yesterday, but is she the best salesperson for this?
I think it's going to take a whole of government effort. I think Anthony Albanese, given every function that I went to in the lead up to the election, the first thing that Albo said was that we will adopt the Uluru Statement in full. So I think it rests with the Prime Minister. I think it's good that Linda Burney, being an Indigenous Australian, is the figurehead within the government. That's a very positive step and a very good thing probably in terms of rallying Indigenous Australians. But I think it's going to take everyone in the cabinet, and it's going to take political will and a bit of wheeling and dealing from the Prime Minister himself.
And Fiona, and what do you think of the stance? Secondly, I guess, what do you think of the stance Peter Dutton's taking on it?
Look, I think Peter Dutton's taking a wise, methodical stance to this. I mean, changes to our constitution are a very rare thing, and there are still a lot of questions that Labor haven't answered. I think personally one of the most important pieces here is that our nation's a long way down the journey of reconciliation, and we still have a long way to go. And anything that goes up as a referendum needs to pass, because otherwise a lot of that work of reconciliation goes backwards. So I think in many ways we don't want to see hurt or harm or more harm done to First Nations Australians. But at the same token, who is going to be in the Voice? How is this council going to be made up? How do you get elected to that? What is the term of people's election to the Voice? And with the wording that has come out from Albanese and from the Labor Party so far, they are, essentially a lobby group that will be able to have all the advice in the world, but the government of the day is not necessarily needed to take any of that advice on board. Personally, Andrew, I look at something like the Human Rights Committee, which sits within the standing orders. Now, the Human Rights Committee could effectively veto legislation if they like, because it doesn't fit within Australians' edict on human rights and what we've signed within international treaties. That is a committee that sits within standing orders that actually has more power than what this would sitting in the Constitution. So, this needs to not just be something that people, sit there and wave from the hill. It needs to be something that also has genuine outcomes for us First Nations Australians. And I think in many ways, that's where I have to say I even agree with some of the things Lydia Thorpe has said, that, she wants to see genuine outcomes in the areas that she thinks are important. So I think in many ways it's a great idea, but it has to be right, and we can't afford to get this wrong.
And finally, I'm just going to ask Darren Barnett about cashless gaming. Do you think we'll ever see cashless gaming cards in your home state?
Well, look, it's going to be tough, because we all saw the Gillard-Andrew Wilkie experience in 2010 and how the clubs have very significant lobbying power when it comes to campaigning. I think there needs to be some change. I personally would be happy if we had cashless gaming, but there's still a fair bit of water to go under the bridge before we see it come to fruition, Andrew.